Hello, Sam. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. So, Sam,
Okay.
welcome back.
Thank you. How are you doing today? Still holding up?
Oh, yeah, today is fifth day of our cyber range, and
Yeah.
tomorrow is the last day. So, we were working all the weekends. I was here in the studio yesterday. My colleague Yulia was here day before yesterday. No one stopped being a part of the cyber competition. Hackers don't sleep.
No, they don't.
Even vice versa, they reactivate at about 1 a.m. And the most risks that we monitor in the morning happening during the night. So we know
Yeah,
these guys.
you know what they used to say, right? They
Yeah.
used to, they used to, there was a tradition that people used to push out releases on Friday night,
Yeah.
and all the hackers would just wait until Saturday morning, and that's
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
would actually get their first build, look for the first set of vulnerabilities. But that's why we don't release on Friday night anymore. But
Never,
yes,
never.
hackers, they don't sleep.
Yeah, yeah. So it's everything like in real life, and hackers already discovered, I don't remember exact number of risks, but something about 13 or 15 business risks. And our entertainment park suffered, the bank system suffered, the oil and gas factory suffered, and a lot of other objects in our infrastructure. There are just few objects remaining still untouched, but I think during this night there will be nothing left. And
I know.
it's everything as in reality. Some of the risks were embedded into the cyber competition, but some of the risks they discovered we didn't predict. As an example, they found some vulnerabilities to hack the airport registration system and the airport ticket system to allow getting the tickets for free. And the same with the entertainment park, so anyone could get the tickets in online cash desk just without any payments.
Wow.
This is
Okay.
not the worst
So
thing.
I mean, here's the
This is
here's
not
the
the worst thing.
here's the good news, bad news, right? I've been looking at it too. I've been looking at the panels and seeing how many. I see what you're saying. Most of them had two or three of them all red, and I think it's very exciting. But here's the good news and the bad news, right? The good news is that it's a simulation for now. This is not really happening in real life. That's a
Yeah.
big part. But the other part too is I think that's what I think a lesson for everybody to learn is cyber attack is not a question of if, it's when, right? So right now there are bots scanning our systems. Right now at this very moment there are people trying to get into our systems. Right now while we are talking, people are trying to brute force in. They're trying to go different routes in. It is happening right now. So I think it's like anything else. If you don't put awareness on it, uh, ultimately you're going to get hurt, right? So it's important to see that, and I was actually showing it to somebody else. They were saying, wait a minute, what's the blue team doing? Why are they all attacked? I said, you have no idea, don't you? It is the true state of security, which is there always going to be some level of breach. The question is, can you control the blast radius? Can you remediate? Can you recover fast enough for it? And do you allow copycats? Can you actually, prevent repeated same type of attacks? Those are the real type of question. But so I think your event really showcased all those things, really lively. I had a lot of exchange with people on LinkedIn, by the way, on my post about your event, and
Thank
everybody
you.
was saying the same thing. Is they're saying that everybody is seeing this live. They've never been able to see red team, blue team, trying to balance
Meeting
out
each
each
other.
other
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you usually hear about it after a report. You got a PDF file and a report,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what you get. This is you seeing it live.
You normally see 200 pages PDF with some graphs and a very complicated logic. So you're kind of, okay. So this is my consulting piece of paper. I have just paid $300,000, and here's the outcome. I'm not gonna read it, but
Yeah,
I had to do this. So this is I've done.
yeah,
I spend my
yeah.
budget, and I'm okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And this is why I said the other day when we were talking the other day at the other session, I honestly think that some form of this type of cyber range, I think, needs to be part of a CI/CD pipeline. What I meant by that is it shouldn't be a, let's do it, once. I think it should be almost the tail end of the process where we have pre-prod, where we test our pre-prod. It should be some part of that to allow it. I mean, we had it buck bash, but that's a whole different thing. I think a cyber range would be very, very interesting to train up the people, but it's also very interesting if we can adapt some of the pieces of software as a release cycle into it. But that's a different discussion.
Even beside that, there is another key topic we're discussing within the cyber range is ability to explain to company top management, to chief executive officer, chief financial officer, why do you need money? Why do you need investments?
Right.
And you
Right.
should be able to first demonstrate the negative impact. No, even in a different way. You should be able, being IT security, to understand what is their fear, what do they afraid most of all. And there's not a lot of things, actually. There's 1, 2, 3, not much for each of the
Yeah.
key people in the company. You should understand their fear. You should understand what is the connection in your technical environment with the fear. What kind of risks will happen, will be the reason to work this fear out. So, and then you have to explain how you're going to protect it. If so, there's actually no limit how much you can expect as an investment, because in this case, business understand they are not investing into yet another antivirus, into yet another black box, but they know you understand them, and they know you protect them from the most scary things.
Yeah. So I completely agree. So in fact, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but risks, they're not resolved. I remember I was in a board meeting that somebody, not my current company, previous company, where the board was asking me, how do you resolve this risk? I said, you don't. You manage a risk. A risk is actually managed. It's about how much investment, how do you actually tackle it, you balance it out. And what you said about selling security is actually very, very true. It used to be a very difficult topic. It still is, because there are buyers, and if you understand, I mean, of course you understand the buyers, but if you look at the buyers, they're either from old school, from either IT, which looked at security as it's a check mark because InfoSec asked me to do it, or if you look at security folks, they don't really have budgets. CISO, I could tell you, it used to be we don't have budgets, right? So
Yeah.
it's a difficult situation. Who's going to pay for it? Some of the application vulnerabilities are actually paid by a line of business, and a lot of business guys want features. They don't want to worry about security. So you have a situation that everybody says is somebody else's budget. And the toughest part is, I used to joke and say, but it's true, that selling security is like selling insurance, which is when nothing bad happens, you're like, why am I paying so much money every
Yeah,
month?
but you have to understand what this insurance protects you from.
That's exactly right. So your point about showcasing what the business impact is exactly what's necessary. So this is part of what could do to show that business impact and potential risk.
Okay, Sam, so you have some slides, right, to show the balancing act between user experience and security.
Well, yeah, so talk about that section. So I actually talked to some of my clients and talked to some of my my team that engaged with the clients, and I try to ask them what would be the most interesting topic for them. There is this balance between, as we rush towards digital, there is this balance between everybody moving to digital, which is great. I mean, especially for a geek, I love it, that we're all moving to modernize and become more and more digital. However, there is this perception that, you know what, they're going to put off security or not deal with security, or security is going to slow me down. Security is bad for usability. Security is going to make all my users go away because it's too complicated. There's some truth to it. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So I'm not saying that it's not true. There's some aspect of it. However, I think to your point earlier about how the buyers need to look at security as a first-class citizen, I think we're getting to a stage where security has to be built into the design process. It has to, the security folks has to work closely with the designer, not so much. And I've been in situations a number of times, even recently, debating what is the good login screen, what is a good flow for the user, and I love it because we're getting to a point that at least we're at the table to discuss that. It used to be that the whole application would roll out or do whatever, then you wait until pen testing and figure out what's wrong with it. That's the wrong way to do it. That's too late. Or then they figure out how to actually mitigate and find all the bad, ghost accounts and so on. That's too late. It is supposed to be that collaboration. So I'm actually going to talk about this I think, debate that's been going on forever about usability. And I learned a few things about usability as well, honestly. I'm not a usability expert, but I've learned a few things about usability by talking to a number of people, did my research on it. And so I'm going to talk a bit about how those two would come together.
All right. So you're going to show the slides, right?
Sure. Should I start? Oh, I thought
I'm
done.
Yeah, please start. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great.
I can see your screen.
Wonderful. All right. There's nothing secret on this machine, I made sure, so don't worry about it. So, but anyway, thanks for giving me this time, by the way. Good morning, everybody. I kind of mentioned a little bit about what this session is about, but I really want to start with a question. I want you to take a deep breath, slow down a little bit for a second, and think for a second with me, and ask yourself, when do you think you're the most creative? When do you think you're actually most engaged about a task, what you're working on? And for the whole session, I want you to start thinking about this, and I will tell you my perspective at the end of it. But as a people who knows me knows that I'm a bit of a combat sport freak, and I can tell you there is something that's connected between this feeling of relaxation, this feeling of engaged in creativity in a space that's connected with safety. And so I'll leave it at that, but I'd love to hear from you a little bit more. So as I mentioned before, I'm not a usability expert, but I love things that it's beautiful, it's design, it's got thinking process behind it. I put this car in front of it because that was my love when I was a kid. And I remember the first time, I went into my friend's, dad's car, and I looked at the door of this car, and when I closed that door, it makes that certain sound. It had that excitement. It makes me wonder, right? The word amazing in this case is not just the typical sense of it. It really has this amazing feeling that makes you wonder what a good, feeling. What is it? What is it? Makes you very interested in it, and it's engaging. It doesn't just look pretty. There are things that you could do with it. There are things that you can actually work with it. And when you work with it, there was a certain emotion. I know it sounds like I'm going into esoteric, but think back into the most exciting application. Think back in the most exciting user interface. Think back in the most exciting brand. Think back in the products that you think the first time you hold up, and I'm not a fan of one product versus another one, but think about it. Picked up your first iPhone, your first Palm Pilot, whatever it is. It's rewarding. It gives you a sense that there is something that enjoy. So experience doesn't just start or stop with the user interface or buttons and styles. All those things are important. They're all connected. But there's really a lot more to it. So as I mentioned before, I started looking into it quite a bit. There's a wonderful book I need to give them credit for, gentlemen. Law of UX. I love it. And I got to understand some of the laws and psychology behind user interfaces. I had a number of friends that I've talked to that they're usability experts, they're experience experts. What it comes down to, though, however, it's I think what Johnny I puts it best, which is there is beauty when something works and it works intuitively. Meaning that whatever you do, it could be the most beautiful interface, it could be the most beautiful screen, and so on, but it has to work. And work includes resilience, includes safety, includes security. Now, some of these laws, I think it's very, very interesting, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in these laws, but I did go through it in detail about what they are and picked out a couple of them that I find is actually very relevant to both, understanding design, but more importantly, understanding that apparently I had a newfound appreciation for design after this exercise that I've gone through in the last few weeks, is that I realized that there was actually a lot of psychology within user interface that we actually use in security as well. And I'll point some of these out, and I'd love to hear from you later on what you think about some of these areas. Because, so for example, Fitch law, it might seem like a simple thing, which is, the width of a certain item is directly, how likely people would actually click on that box, for example, or how difficult, what is the resistance for somebody to go to a certain item depends on a distance from, where you at to the width of it, because we think very horizontally, not as much vertically. So the width matters much more than horizontal. All that is very interesting. But if you think about what we do in security, there was a certain aspect to that too, and I could get into a little bit later. User prefer your site to work the same. So this is mostly, Jacob's law is mostly around what common things people are used to a certain interface, get used to it, and they're used to it, and they want to see certain things that is similar instead of relearning everything. So there is an association of what they have learned already. They try to reuse what they have learned and apply it. And the interesting thing is in security, we use that a lot, or hackers actually use that a lot, which is they built that familiarity so that they could actually hide in plain sight. And this is actually the most important one that I think we have to be very honest about in usability and security. It basically lists out that there's certain things that has a certain inherent amount of complexity that cannot be removed or hidden. There are applications that you've seen that basically when they actually try to, I hate to use the word, dumb it down, but really to make it really, really simple, really, they ended up dumbing it down because in the sense that there are things that sometimes just needs multiple steps. By moving it into one single step, you're either lying to the audience or you actually ended up making it more difficult down the pipe. And so those are all great, all design measure. That's wonderful. However, security is not a thing you can ignore anymore. And we can look at how beautiful it is. We can look at it. And for example, the card that I showed, I can guarantee you safety was not an afterthought about that car, especially because it was designed for, a lot of 24 hours racing and so on. So if you think about security, this is some of the data from Poneman and from IBM and from Hershey Group. And so this year alone, the projection of cybercrime is about $6 trillion. And so you might say, well, okay, the verdict's not out yet. It might be. But I'll tell you this. From Microsoft Log, they were saying that they've actually counted about $3 trillion just in the first half of the year. And usually because of Black Friday and everything else, that second half of the year would actually go up. So the chance of it actually hitting $6 trillion is extremely high. But these are the different areas where we're losing money. So loss of business. So we used to debate what I was saying before, which is, how do we convince buyers to actually buy security and so on? It used to be, well, show me where the loss of business is, until I actually lose transactions. Well, we are seeing transactions being stolen right now. We are seeing even in financial business where transaction is actually being stolen. It is happening. So it's not just about brand damage, which is key. 4 years ago, same research listed out brand damage as number one, which is it's not as tangible or it's much more difficult to quantify back then. Now we have actual data to show there's actual loss to business. And it's extremely high and it's growing if you look at the trend. And these are some of the attacks that is connected with the cost, the cybercrime cost that we talked about. I'll start with the upper right. I think it's almost a no-brainer. I'll explain a little bit about what this is, but the cost of attack is every attack, how much money it costs to remediate, to resolve, to track it, to hunt it down, and then to fix it and so on. And then the frequency of attack is how often does the market actually see that type of attack is happening. So which means on the upper right corner, our attack that's the most expensive to resolve. At the same time, it happens a lot. So those are the ones that you clearly should be really concerned about. Now, compromised credential, identity. We all talk about identity. Everybody's talking about zero trust, wonderful thing, but we put in all the burden basically on IAM. This is why it's so important for us to focus on IAM, understand what that connection is with the user interface and the design is absolutely critical. Application vulnerability was much lower a couple of years ago, moved up substantially. Cloud configuration, no brainer. Everybody knows how many S3 buckets out there. It's actually still public, right? Phishing stays there all the time. You can always assume that it's never going to go away. Physical security breach is still very high. It's still extremely high. In fact, one of the cases I'm going to show you in a second here is connected with that. Now, social, the cost of it, is high, but the frequency is not as high I think for a number of reasons, but I can't comment on this particular research. I think it's actually because it's much harder to actually track it down to get the data out of it. My personal feeling is that social should be actually substantially higher on a frequency side. And so why is it so difficult? So I have a number of folks that ask me, why do you think this is so difficult and why now? Why now is really two words. It's scale and money, okay? Meaning we're now at a scale for digital that we've never seen before. And this is why it's so impactful. At the same time, and you know what happens with volume. With large volume, attackers could hide themselves much easier. Their chance of yield is much higher. And the money part is also true with BTCs and different types of ways that attackers could now monetize out of it. It used to be when you get paid is when you get caught. That's in the industry. We'll always say that. You could do almost whatever you want to do, cover your tracks, but the minute you try to get paid, you get caught. However, that has changed substantially. There is a market for exchange on different phases. There is a market for it. So scale and money are the two reasons why I would say it's making it so much worse right now in the market. Now, and there are also reasons that these are not new. These are all existing reasons, but I like to call them out so that people understand why security is such an important thing and such a difficult thing. Element of surprise, I mentioned it all the time. If you're the house, you cover up all the different areas, all the different angles, all the attack surfaces. You have to do that 24/7 nonstop. The attacker only have to pick one single area and try it out, then try another one, then try another one at any time. Could be midnight, could be, right at your birthday, when you're celebrating, could be any time. So the element of surprise always on their side. Ease of access. You don't even have to break into a data center to get into on the LAN anymore. You can gain access because everybody's on the cloud. Everybody's actually, got automation. It's much easier for them to access it. Scale advantage, as mentioned. And it's much more than, in the data center now. So much software is on your phone. It's everywhere else. So now you can learn so much when you're doing your footprinting. Download an app, take it apart. You see what the company actually calls API and stuff. So that's making it much easier for attacker to actually understand about your company. And then agile development is wonderful. I love it. Trust me. But at the same time, it's changing the attack surface constantly. You did your threat model. You understand what it looks like. Features rolled out every 2 weeks. Try to keep up with it. It's not an easy task. You have to do it. I got some recommendation, but it's not easy. And the old way of just saying no does not work anymore. Digital trust is extremely important, right? Because we do everything. We can't even buy coffee without using the app anymore. So these are, I'm sure you've seen these are CISA's, top great security principle. If you line this up with the law of UX, you actually could draw a number of lines. And I highly encourage you to do that. I have another session that I actually break that down directly and draw a conclusion between those two sets. And I start with that. But if you think about it, it actually has a lot of connection. And there are lots of areas where we need to be very, very careful about it. But just by having that awareness, bring those two together, get the team to talk, get your designer and his security architect to talk, makes a huge difference. But there's one understanding we all have to be very honest about. One thing we have to be all very, very honest about on the security side is an old saying that, money only buy you time in security, which means it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So don't just build a system that assume that you can always defend but not react and not remediate. That's absolutely critical. That needs to be part of your plan, which means as you design your interface, figure out exactly how that's connected with the rest of them. Now, so security and design experience, I personally feel it has to be these three things. It has to work. I remember a client coming to me and, Sam, if your product can allow me to even function and the users are not going to use it because it's so difficult, it doesn't work, then it's no good to me. It's worse than the worst hacker because I can't even launch the product. So it's an interesting perspective. I see where they're coming from. And part of me completely agree with them. So it has to work. It has to be trusted. If you think about a user, ask your users, would you rather use an application that's working? And again, trusted means, is resilient, is reliable, it's available, right? Not just about, privacy and security, but that as well. And it has to be usable. We all know, we changed the game. You can't just dump out a text screen and VT100 emulation and assume that the users would just, read the documentation anymore. That world's gone. Everything has to be extremely user-friendly and very usable. Unfortunately, those two things there don't always come together. I got a few cases that I looked at personally that I thought it was a little comical, in a sad way, that I want to share with you. This is an occasion that I walked into my living room. You can guess what it is, and I saw my wife spelling out her password out loud in the living room. Why would you allow people to press hold on your mic to spell out your password? That to me is just bad security design. It might sound like the coolest usability function, but if there is a security architect that was sitting in the same room and the designer says, hey, wouldn't it be cool? That security expert should say, yeah, it would be very, very cool, but you do understand that you encourage people to actually spell out your password. Well, but it's in the living room. Well, you need to debate. You need to really debate to understand. And that to me is a sign that it's gone a little too far in usability. This one I love. I'll pause for a second and ask you, what do you think is wrong with this? This is not just this one building. There are a number of buildings like that, so I'm not picking on this one. And this is an old image, so I know that they have changed it, so I'm not disclosing anything that would be unsafe. But if you think about it, some of these scanners, without getting into it, they, for usability reason, when they walk out, they don't want people to have to scan their cards or to press a button. Most of the time in the US now, we have a red button. You have to physically press the button to go out. And that's for safety reasons, in case there's a fire, what happens. But to be cool, a lot of them, even in a safety, environment, they have these, IR sensors and proximity sensors, which is wonderful. It's great. And the problem is they always tune it too high, meaning that they shoot all the way down to reflective range, all the way to the floor, which allows you to just wave something reflective underneath the table, underneath the door, which always have the sweeper, and then you can the door opens up. And it's no secret, I'm not sharing anything to you. And I'll add a little bit more to it. Look at the upper right. Everything that's connected to the sensors, all the cables actually exposed and you can actually see it. I don't know why they don't run it inside the beam. I don't know why they don't put a box around it, at least to physically protect it. But if you can get through that glass, and I don't see any kind of temporary sensor in here, you could get through that glass, you could get to that cable, you could do whatever you want. Bad design, right? And here's another fun one. So I got this question a lot. I'm constantly being asked, say, well, login screen, should I have username login? The typical question is, invalid username or password doesn't work. Even if I tell them it's an invalid username, the chance of them doing brute force is still not very high because they can figure out if the username is valid anyway. So what's the point, and so and so. That argument is somewhere in the middle. It's a double-edged sword. That debate. It's true purely from that perspective, and say, why would you give more information away to the user? And at the same time, then we have crazy design like this one, unfortunately, that basically allow people to validate a username by sign up. So because there is so much focus around encouraging sign up, so there's very little checks or limit on signing out for a lot of, not just this website, but for a lot of the website where when you sign up, it immediately tells you if the email address is used for another existing customer already. Why not send them an email to that email address and tell them, by the way, you have an account already? Oh, because that's not as user-friendly. I want instant gratification. That's where you have a problem. Attackers are using this to validate email addresses to figure out if their database is any good. And some of these got no limits. They don't even have a cap on it. And so I think, and it's easy to criticize and easy to joke about some of these things. And I'm only showcasing, not to pick on people, but I'm only showcasing to say that there is a balance there. There is a balance there, and I think there was only one way to achieve that balance, and it's absolutely critical that I think we have to come together. I know it's not okay, so that's easy. It's not so easy. I've been in discussion that most people treat security expert as don't talk to them because they would say no to certain things. They would freak you out. They don't understand user experience. I sincerely advise you. I mean, seriously, get the security architect to come in, add design time, collaborate with them. That's absolutely critical. It expands our world. It's in defense. It's not so much just about what you can see. It's about your peripheral vision, which is what you can understand on the side. Nobody wants you to be a security expert. Nobody's asking you to be, but you have to be aware of what potentially could hurt you. That's what I'm asking for. And defense has to be a responsibility for everybody, and you have to have that in the culture. I'm not saying just constantly being pessimistic, move slowly, and so on. But the sense of defense, it has to be in the company culture. It has to be in the product culture. Without that, your product would always, leap too far, would always take too many steps, and then your remediation would cost you 10 times as much. So have defense. I can guarantee you, and if you want to debate out of it, DM me. I would love to sit down with you and we can go through it and see how you can build a very beautiful experience for the end user, but it still could be safe. And again, it's not just about protection. It's also about remediation, about actually, forensic. How do you actually figure out what's wrong with it? How do you remediate? How do you control the blast radius? Look at that whole thing. Don't just force the user interface to be the only gate. That's the only other recommendation I would have. Learn to play chess. Hackers, they don't just take one step. Think about multiple steps. Don't just say, I'm debating about this screen. Security about this screen. Is the example I gave you is very clear. It's not about the login screen. The login screen was actually fine. Is there a sign-up screen that caused the login screen insecure in this case, right? So play chess in the sense that look at multiple steps. Build a network of trust. There is something that's very valuable about end users understanding one level of trust with one entity and tied it together. Be transparent with your users, and I could go on, but the most important thing here is value trust in your company, right? Don't abuse it, don't ignore it, but really value that trust that your end user has given you. Take that responsibility. I'm using up a little too much time already. I'll leave you with one more statement that I'm making. It's a personal feeling of mine, and I'll just read it out because I think we are engaged in innovative when we have a sense of security and safety. I feel that it's just like in anywhere else, when you're more relaxed, when you actually have a sense of safety, when you're around people that you feel that you can trust, when you're around people that you understand they might disagree with you, but at the same time, I know the intention is positive. It's good, positive intention. When you have that, you start to realize that you're more open to be vulnerable. You design, you open up your ideas, you debate. You're not in an area that you feel you actually have to spend 80% of your effort fighting everybody else versus 20% of effort creating great products. That sense of safety needs to be created as a culture, as an environment. But think about your users. You want your users to engage your product. You want your users to love your product. You want your users to actually feel free to give you ideas about what to do with your next product. You want your users to be part of your team in some ways. You need to give them sense of safety as well. They need to feel safe about your product before they would engage it, before they would use it. So it's absolutely critical for us to actually marry security and how we design great software, so that moving on, as we start to move through our journey from connected solutions with the web and internet and everything to more agile, adaptive solutions, that we can actually be able to pivot to more cloud solutions, so we can access everything, to now what I call trusted solution, so we can truly rely on digital. We can actually rely on digital for buying coffee, sure, for calling a car, sure, for everything. But that requires security as part of that experience. So I'll stop here, and I have a lot more material in a couple of sessions that's coming up. I encourage you. Would love to hear from you. Here's my connection, LinkedIn and for Twitter. please ping me. Love to hear from you. Would love to debate more about this topic.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Sam. And one of the last key phrases I heard from you, we can rely on digital. We can rely on digital. We can.
I think we can.
If we are sure, and this is my opinion, we can if we're sure that there will be nothing bad which digital can bring to the real life, to the reality. And this is all in our hands to make sure the digital is safe.
I agree. I agree completely.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. And thank you for attending the standoff, and thank you for partnership. See you next time.
No, appreciate it. Talk to you soon, Vlad.
Talk to you.
All right.
Bye, Sam.
Thank you.